We'll be starting in 1 minute.
All right.
Good morning and welcome to the National Association for Court Management webinar sponsored and presented by Ankobia and Aptitude 9, Robotic Process Automation, empowering courts to tackle challenges in new ways. My name is Charleston Carter, and I'm the Trial Court Administrator for the Superior Court of North Carolina, 26th Judicial District in Mecklenburg County. And I'm a member of the NACM Board of Directors and serve as the chair of the Communications Committee. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenters, Johnny Gordon with Ankobia Group and Anthony Fong with Aptitude 9. Mr. Gordon is the CEO of Ankobia Group, a company that provides strategic advice and technology implementation expertise for public safety and justice agencies. Mr. Fong is the CEO of Aptitude 9, a company that provides digital solutions that improve service to citizens, resulting in organizational cost savings and increased employee productivity and satisfaction. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. This presentation will be approximately 60 minutes long, and we are recording today's webinar. The recording will be available for attendees after the presentation and for members of the NACM on the NACM website. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey at the end of the webinar. If you are joining the webinar today on your computer, please submit questions to Mr. Gordon or Mr. Fong throughout the presentation by typing your questions into the question pane of the attendees control panel. We will address your questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If you are attending the webinar by phone, you may email your question to nacm@nacmnet.org. That's nacm@nacmnet.org after the webinar, and your questions will be answered. At this given time, I would like to turn the session over to Mr. Fong.
Hi, good morning. Really excited to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today in NACM and with Johnny from Ankobia. Really excited about being able to present on robotic process automation. So we're going to first start with Johnny, and he's going to be providing information about RPA and how it connects with the court system. And so I'll pass it over to Johnny.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. So in addition to, as you can see from the agenda, in addition to talking about some ideas, some opportunities for improvement that we've identified, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So we've got some ideas, but we are absolutely positive that with all the courts professionals that we have on the phone, that you've got some ideas as well in terms of some potential opportunities for improvement. When you think about RPA, just think about that in terms of having an additional staff member or a group of staff members at your disposal to execute on your various work tasks. Anthony's also going to walk us through what is RPA. So he's going to give you a really good detailed definition of RPA. And then we're going to share with you a few videos that we have and show you some demonstrations of RPA in action. And then we're going to go through our question and answer session. Next slide, please, sir. If you could start the video, great. We want to just give you something to think about. This is something that we are positive that you're all dealing with as we get to work with courts across the country, and we want to kind of get the juices flowing with regard to some potential opportunities for improvement. If you could, sir.
And then one day, the world changed. It said, You want to see scary? I'll show you scary. And like that, it took away the thing we love most, the thing we need most, being together. Businesses closed. Hospitals were overwhelmed. The world seemed to stop. It asked for heroes, nurses and doctors and paramedics. But as they fought on one front, another appeared, as insidious as the virus itself. Testing and paperwork and supply chain issues, creating barriers between the healthcare worker and the patient. Help us, they said, help us do our job, because nowhere in a medical oath does it say anything about paperwork. So they sent in reinforcements, and they called it robotic process automation to clear a 160-day registration backlog in a single day, to provide more accurate test results in 1/3 the time, to reduce the screening time of healthcare workers to 4 hours from 5 days, to cut the processing time of an application from 45 minutes to 5 minutes, to accelerate the distribution of loans to help keep businesses alive. This isn't just about the coronavirus. It's about helping to solve the greatest challenges in medicine, business, life, faster, more efficiently. Think about what's possible if we eliminate drudgery, time-wasted repetitive tasks. This is where hope meets technology, so that we can all go back to doing the greatest thing, the most valuable thing, the thing that says we're not afraid anymore, bringing the world back together.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, next slide. So although we're talking about courts and justice and not necessarily the medical profession, I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to all the changes that COVID has driven. When you look at things like, different areas in which we have backlogs, new ways in which we're having to conduct business, certainly COVID has forced some changes, but it's also driven some opportunities, I think, for change too, that maybe have been stalled over the years for various reasons. So one of those opportunities for improvement that we took a look at is accurate reporting of criminal histories. So there's a lot of different barriers between getting these criminal histories reported in a timely manner at each stage of the process and kind of where we are today. One of those barriers is the fact that there are so many different major stakeholders. So as this diagram shows, this is what we call a RACI chart, and it shows the process of reporting criminal history. So if you look down where we see stage, we see the arrest stage, report arrest charges, accusation and or indictment stage. And these may vary a tad bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but one of the things that you can see from the chart is that every stakeholder has a different role in making sure typically that those criminal histories are reported. Now, again, this may vary just a bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but in general, one of the major barriers that you see here are all the different systems that are involved in the process. So, one of the challenges we have today, if you see this quote actually came from the former Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. They did a study and they looked at criminal histories across the country, but they also looked at criminal histories in particular in the state of Georgia. And so when you look at 32% of the criminal histories that are incomplete across the country, this creates a couple of very significant problems for us. One is the public safety problem. So obviously, if the criminal histories are incorrectly reported or incomplete, then a law enforcement officer may be pulling someone over and not even know who they're dealing with because the criminal history hasn't been updated. And maybe that person does have a record, and maybe there's something out there that that officer should be made aware of. So you got an officer safety issue there. You also have an issue with regard to all the records that are related to individuals that have actually either the charges have been dropped or dismissed, and then those haven't been reported. So now we're putting barriers up for people that are trying to resume normal lives. So to illustrate that, again, just doing a little research, one of the things that we took a look at is there was a recent cleanup effort. This was in the state of Georgia a couple of years back, and they actually went in and applied a lot of people power to clean up 90,000 records. And when they looked at that, about 50% of the outstanding charges really were dropped or dismissed, but it hadn't been reported. Having had the opportunity to work with various agencies that are responsible for feeding these criminal histories up to the FBI ultimately, and seeing how this works, then you wind up with requests from veterans, requests from lots of people across our society to come back in and get these records cleaned up so before they can get housing or jobs in many cases. So that raises a significant barrier for between a person's ability to kind of resume normal activities as a citizen and having to deal with a criminal history that hasn't been properly reported. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also a public safety issue for the officers. But when you look at these different systems that are all a part of the process, you can see very quickly how easy it is for there to be gaps in the reporting process, because things do happen in different systems in many cases today. So what can RPA potentially do for us to help resolve that problem? Next slide, please, sir. What RPA can do is through that robotic process automation, just like you saw in the video, the bots can be programmed to actually perform functions as if they were a person. So one thing that RPA can do is RPA can interrogate all those different systems and identify charges that haven't been reported. It can create a list of charges that needs to be reported. And in some cases, it can be even programmed to perform the updates. So that, again, it's not an all or none proposition. But again, if we can get improvement in any one of those areas, then that's going to move us in the right direction to be able to report criminal histories in a timely manner. So this is one use case that we wanted to share with you. And again, what we're hoping that you do is we walk through these, what we see as potential opportunities for RPA. We want you to put your thinking caps on a bit, and hopefully you'll share with us in that chat section that Mr. Carter mentioned earlier, and then we'll collectively come up with additional ways that we can help make the system better through RPA. But this is just one example. Next slide, please, sir. We want to share with you some other opportunities for improvement, again, to get the juices flowing for you. One of the things that we see just in general are handoffs between justice partners. A lot of those are paper-driven today. And what that means is multiple things. It means that there's the opportunity for just straight loss of paper. Difficult in terms of accountability. You've got individuals having to sign either pieces of paper to say that they signed for something, or in some cases the logbook. In some cases this is technology enabled, but it might be two different systems that don't necessarily talk to each other. So you're still depending on human intervention to transfer that information from one system to the other. So, one of the things that RPA can do for us is, when there's an absence of an integration between two systems, again, RPA can be like a person that literally bridges that gap for us. So if you can envision, perhaps if the prosecutor is not on the same system that's connected to the courts, RPA can literally take cases from the prosecutor system and file them into the court system for you, based on business rules that can be set up after doing a nice thorough analysis for you. Same thing for the different justice partners in terms of corrections, being able to share information and make sure that information is moved from one system to the other in a timely manner, in an automated fashion. And just like your public portals that are available 24/7, unless there's some kind of maintenance or something like that, RPA, the bots can be working for you 24/7, so they won't go to sleep. So if there's a case that comes through in the middle of the night, that information can be transferred over to the courts, and then that information can be available first thing in the morning. One of the other things that we looked at, because again, you'll see a recurring theme here in terms of being able to bridge the gaps between disparate systems, is improving the expungement or record sealing process. Again, it depends on which part of the country that you're working in, what that's called. But today, one of the challenges to that is that this information, again, is usually proliferated across multiple systems. So you may have some arrest information in a law enforcement system, or RMS. You may have some arrest information in a prosecutor case management system, and you might have some information in a court or clerk case management system. But again, it's the same problem with information spread across all these different systems. And if you want to, truly seal and or expunge a record, really in many jurisdictions, all those different systems need to be addressed. So how do you enable this to take place in such a way that a person doesn't have to hop from office to office in order to get this complete expungement done? Well, once again, enters RPA as a potential solution for that, because once again, it can, based on the business rules around expungement that you get to establish, it can go in and interrogate all these systems. They can either be programmed to make the changes for you, because it can actually do data entry on behalf of your agency, and or it can identify lists that need to be worked by human later, really just depending upon what business process you become comfortable with implementing. So that's another major opportunity as well. There's also the opportunity to expedite or speed up the deployment of new technologies such as ODR. One of the barriers to entry and being able to participate in an open and equitable manner in the judicial process is something as simple as, I don't have money for childcare, or perhaps in today's environment, so many people are working multiple jobs, they just don't have the time to actually go down to the courthouse. But they need to be interacting in such a way so that they don't get harmful judgment information on their record. And again, now you're looking at, credit potentially being wrecked, and or you're looking at, dispossessories and or evictions, people potentially being removed from their homes. So being able to open up this opportunity to make justice more open, ODR is really one of those platforms that's been developed over the years that can really help with that. But again, there are barriers for being able to stand up this technology, things like duplicate data entry. Again, different systems, oftentimes having to input information in one system and then manually put that in another system really opens you up in terms of mistakes. But another barrier for entry is something as simple as training. The more systems that you implement and have to maintain, the more systems that your staff, your team members have to understand how to operate. So if you could use, again, RPA to program that in such a way that maybe it took off some of the burden from having to interact as much with the ODR system, so that the bots do all that and move all that information over for you, that's one less system that you have to train your people on. So again, when you look at deploying new technology, RPA can positively impact the amount of learning that an organization has to go through in order to take on a new technology, new technology capability. But it can also speed up the deployment of technologies and bridge those gaps in terms of integrating multiple systems together. So what we gave you here is just a couple of things for you to think about in terms of some potential opportunities where we've done some studying and we understand that RPA can help. And again, I'd love to look forward to seeing what you put in the chat room, because I know that there's going to be others with all the experts we got on the phone. All right, next slide, sir. So one of the other things that we wanted to leave you with today are some things that you need to think about in terms of critical success factors. Like, what are the things, capabilities, processes, considerations that you need to really think about to really maximize the value from RPA? Well, one of the first things that we need to think about is having strong organizational change management, OCM. So for those of you who aren't familiar with OCM as a term, it's really that discipline around how we help organizations implement changes. They may be business process changes, they may be technology changes, they may be cultural changes that you're trying to drive across the organization, but how do we collectively and intentionally help our organization navigate the change and maximize whatever the value is that we're trying to derive from those changes? So you really need to have OCM in place, because there will be some changes to business processes. There will be some changes in terms of roles and responsibilities. And we need to make sure that everybody really understands what those changes are and how they will impact their specific role in the process. Another major capability that you need to have in place is business process analysis and business process reengineering. And again, because of all the reasons that I stated earlier, this is going to be a change in the way you operate. So you want to be able to do a deep dive into your business processes, make sure that they're well documented. Everybody has a shared understanding of what the processes really are. And then more important, or just as important, is what's the future state going to be like? And make sure that there's an orderly way to go through that and come to agreement on that as well. And then last but not least, in terms of implementation capabilities, are program and project management, or what we call PPM. Again, this is going to be a major initiative. And in addition to business process analysis, there's obviously going to be a technology implementation. There's obviously going to be requirements development. So organizing that work and being able to manage it, schedule it, manage any budget considerations that are associated with that is really going to be key to your ability to effectively roll out RPA. Another key is executive sponsorship. And actually, executive sponsorship and governance kind of go together. This will not work. These types of changes will not work without leadership driving it, leadership, at the table, understanding what the desired outcomes are for at an organizational level, because there will be decisions that have to be made and things may be escalated up to the top, but executive sponsorship is really critical. And right along with that is governance. So your executives will be instrumental in leading the change and helping to communicate what the desired outcomes are going to be and driving that. But governance is the way, as an organization, that we will go about making our business decisions. And that typically is something that you set up at multiple levels. You'll have the executive level, of course, but you'll also have what we call those subject matter experts. They'll be engaged as well as we think through, making decisions and making sure that we're communicating effectively and everybody's on board with what's going on with the changes. Another one is early involvement. Get ideas up and down the chain for opportunities for improvement, making sure that this is something that the collectively all the stakeholders don't feel like is being done to them, but they're part of the process. And it's better to do that early and often. Making sure that we have appropriate resources. Once you go into making a change like this, got to be committed to it. Got to make sure that we've got the right resources, right people at the table in order to be able to execute the work, because it's going to impact typically multiple stakeholder groups. Oftentimes, if you're dealing with elected officials' offices, so let's say between the clerk, which in many cases is an elected official, not all, but in many cases, versus say maybe a sheriff or law enforcement, then we're going to have to really make sure there's resources from across the board that are assigned to this and dedicated to this. And transparency. So again, continuous communication, which actually goes hand in hand with governance and organizational change management. But we want this to be a transparent process. And so when you start to get into these last three, they're more around some of the specifics and technical on how you execute this, the things you need to consider, rather than how you need to organize yourself. But we want to create momentum for any change. So build on small wins. Anytime you're looking at producing a major change, as that old proverb goes, you eat the elephant one bite at a time. So it's better to build on small, predictable, planned, intentional wins that combined over time, you get that significant value. And that helps you build the momentum that you need to power through any kind of major change. And then you want to keep the big picture perspective in mind. It's real easy to get caught up in either a point solution, something that might look really good, for the next 3 months or 6 months or even year. But always have to come back to, is this really going to take us in the direction we need to go long term? Is this really going to get us the big return on value that we're expecting in terms of the change? And then last, and Anthony and I had a great discussion about this one earlier, because oftentimes innovation is seen differently in government than it is in the private sector. But this is something for you to consider as leaders in the government space. Eliminate barriers to what we call productive problem solving. In other words, we got to cultivate innovation. Let's not be afraid to experiment. Now, you don't want to do this in a production or live environment, but certainly there needs to be, whether it's a space opportunity to collaborate and share ideas, whether we do it remotely like we do here or in person using a whiteboard and then communicating all those different ideas to each other. But there needs to be a way to be able to come together, talk about issues, agree on priorities, get things resolved. And then you want to have a safe technical environment, if available, to be able to experiment. And we want to cultivate that, because those are the kind of factors that really drive innovation. And I think, everyone again on this call can probably relate to being forced into coming up with innovative ways to even just conduct court proceedings today because of COVID-19. But what if we could just do that without being driven by something like COVID? If we could just do that on a regular basis, then we get slotted into what we call a continuous improvement posture, which again, then there are no limits to what we can do in terms of what we can provide in terms of public service. Next slide, sir. All right, and I'll turn it back over to you, Anthony. I think this one's going to be yours, sir.
Great, Johnny. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to really give you some context around robotic process automation, because it is a technology, but the technology is not any good unless you really are able to contextualize it as far as the benefits and how it fits in. And so been around government for about 25 years. For the past 6 years, I've really been focusing on state and local government. I served the governor of Virginia as the Deputy Secretary of Technology. And so I saw firsthand, as far as with government workers, what are the challenges that they had to deal with on a daily basis. We had a lot of budget constraints in 2014 around Virginia, and so we had issues where we had hiring freezes. There were no budgets for new projects, and so we had to really get creative and identify abilities to have cost savings and other types of opportunities to identify resources and be able to leverage those for other types of investments. You have, obviously, with COVID-19 pressures right now with more increase of needs for services, and then you have the backlogs because of the systems having issues being able to process. So, that's definitely created a lot of strains in different agencies. You can think of unemployment or, with Medicaid and other types of programs. You have workforce challenges, especially around IT. There's a lot of demand for IT resources in the private sector. And so those challenges around being able to attract talent and being able to have people retained is certainly an issue. As Johnny had mentioned in his discussion, the legacy systems that we deal with on a basis of conversions and going into different types of applications, it's really challenging to be able to have migrations and the interoperability between systems. And so we need different types of technologies and solutions to really be able to address that. And then you layer on top of that all the regulations and requirements, especially from a security perspective. You have ransomware, you have a lot of different things that are happening in the cybersecurity area. And so if you're not able to have the governance and the protections in cybersecurity, then you certainly are challenged. So being able to find the type of solutions to really address all these things is quite challenging. And in my 25 years in government, I've never seen anything like robotic process automation, where there's the ease of use, there's a focus on the government worker, being able to give them tools and solutions to be able to do more with more, as opposed to the traditional do more with less type of model. So really, I've been excited about this arena for years, and really think that it's going to be something that transforms how government is able to do its work and be able to provide for citizens. So just to give additional context, we've had technology revolutions over the past decades, and so we went from mainframes in the 70s to PCs in the 80s, and then we had the internet, and that really transformed a lot of different types of industries. Where would Amazon be without the internet? And then we have new services coming online, like with mobile, with Uber, and delivery of food services. And obviously with COVID-19, that is pretty timely as far as being able to have more contactless types of services. And then more recently, Salesforce being able to have a customer relationship and going into the cloud. So robotic process automation itself is basically a technology that allows for the computer that you have on your desktop to be able to assist you. So if you think about how Alexa or Siri has helped the average mobile user being able to set up appointments using verbal commands and other types of services, it is in that vein of artificial intelligence and technology that robotic process automation has been developed. And particularly, this is a Siri or Alexa type of technology that really is focused on specific tasks that can be helpful for workers in general. So basically what it does is it mimics what a human does on a computer. So whatever a government worker can do on their computer, whether it's going to different applications or different systems, moving data from one system to another, or being able to interact in different ways, this is how robotic process automation works as well. So basically, if you think about how you scroll and go about your day on the computer and provide input and output, those are the types of things that RPA really excels in. So this is a good slide that really gives you high level as far as the types of things it does. So it really automates the manual tasks that people do on a daily basis. So if you spend hours doing certain things, RPA can cover for that. It also has artificial intelligence, so it can make decisions based on rules. And this is not a replacement for people. It's really your own digital worker to be able to help deal with situations where you're getting more work added because there's budget constraints and there's less resources, so you're being handed more work. So instead of handing more work onto your day and adding 3 or 4 hours additional to your your daily workload, you can hand off a lot of the mundane and time-intensive tasks that are repeatable to your digital assistants. So if you think of it that way, there's a lot of benefit in terms of how robotic process automation can make government workers' lives a lot more bearable as far as the additional work. So the next slide really gives you some context as far as what it can do from a practical perspective. So it can log into applications using credentials. It can move files and folders. It can read and write to particular databases. So if you have interoperability issues, it can really take data from one system and then be able to enter in, just like you would enter in a keyboard on your keyboard, into the other system. It can pull data from the web as far as cutting and pasting. It can interact with different types of APIs, and it can work with multiple types of applications. So whether you have PDFs or you have emails and different things that you interact with, it can certainly interact with anything you can on the computer screen. And it also can do a lot of things in terms of calculations and being able to manipulate data and information. So here are some examples as far as the types of use cases that RPA and artificial intelligence has been used. I won't go over all of it, but you can take a look at this once we provide the slides to you. But it has been used in government in document processing, contact center modernization, fraud, waste, and abuse, being able to analyze data. Cybersecurity, a good example of that is that if you have a hire that you're bringing on board someone, instead of an HR manager being able to go to 5 different systems and be able to provision those accounts for the new hire, the bot can do that instantaneously in a matter of seconds for that HR manager. And then benefit processing. So if you think about the requirements that you have to do for benefits processing, being able to adjudicate and review different kinds of information in different systems and bring that all into one view to be able to analyze whether or not a citizen qualifies for a particular benefit. The application, applications can be pulled open by RPA. It can query that information, pull it all in one view, again within seconds as opposed to minutes or hours. And so that really saves a lot of time. It helps clear our backlogs. Right now, there's a lot of challenges around unemployment benefits adjudication. So it can really reduce the time by close to 90% in many cases for those types of reviews. And obviously, there's a major benefit for citizens to be able to get the services they need much quicker. So really this, RPA is very conceptual until you see it in action. So we really wanted to provide you some use cases and being able to show some videos of actually the bots running. So the first video we're going to show is the bot actually going through different types of applications like Word and Adobe, and also does cross systems. So you can imagine instead of Salesforce, you have your online case management system or your court system to deal with billing or whatnot, and then connecting into another system, whether it's internally in the courts or in some other area in terms of public safety. This is really a good representation of how the bot can really automate certain tasks and be able to connect into different systems.
With multiple applications simultaneously. In the next example, our robot will work with 7 applications at once: Excel, Word, PDF, email, SAP, terminals, and Salesforce. The Excel file contains the name, email, SAP number, and an individual code for each person. The robot will first read this data, then open the terminal, input each person's code, and get all the data from the terminal. The emails from the CSV will be input into Salesforce to find every employee, and then the expense data from the terminal will be added into the expense row. After this, the robot will create a Word document from a template with a status report for each person. The Word file will then be converted to PDF and sent as an email attachment. Finally, the robot will find the employee's position in SAP, and with all of the above data, will populate the Excel file used in the beginning. Now, let's start the robot and explain the process in more detail. The robot will start by opening the terminal, Salesforce, and SAP, and by logging into all three systems, preparing all the applications it will work with. It will browse the pages of the terminal and find the ID of the first employee. Then identify the same person in Salesforce based on their email address. The expenses are then added in Expense IT, the Word template filled in, converted to PDF, and sent as an email attachment. The robot then finds the position of the person in SAP, then moves on to the second person, looking for the ID in the terminal. After collecting the data, the robot sees that Salesforce does not display an account for Joe, so it creates one. After doing this, it fills the expenses on Joan's account, creates the Word document, converts it to PDF, and sends it as an email attachment. Then the robot moves on to the third person, and so on. Fast forwarding, we can see that all the data is completed in the Excel file for each person, and the emails for each person are sent with a PDF attachment.
Great, and the beauty of that, really quick, as far as the demonstration, is that you have a legacy system, which is an old COBOL mainframe system. It was able to interact with that. You have new systems, like as Johnny mentioned, an ODR system, so that could be, you know, the Salesforce analogy on that side. And then you have all the data manipulation that's happening by the bot. And the great thing is that the RPA technologies can sit actually on your desktop. So if you think this is like a big IT implementation, it really isn't. It's a very lightweight type of technology that you can actually just start with on your desktop. So thinking about how to get started, we can help you as far as being able to work with one laptop. It's localized, so security requirements are very straightforward, and being able to prove out, you know, an example like this, how it can actually go through your day and be able to automate those particular tasks so that can free up your time for additional things that you prefer to do. So that was a good example of going across systems. So the next one is going to show you basically how the robotic process automation can work with applications, be able to pull that information into an Excel or some other type of format, and using the technology with artificial intelligence and natural language processing to be able to read handwriting. So this is transformational because a lot of governmental organizations get different types of applications, whether it's handwritten by citizens via fax or by mail. And then you also have some that are more digital, where it's printed out, it's typed out by the user. So you can ingest all of those different types of inputs from citizens and streamline it to a point where instead of a government worker entering, typing in all that information, so that there is repetitive type of entry, is to have the bot actually do that for them. So let's see here.
Hello and welcome to this short video showing how UiPath's automation software can speed up new processes introduced in this time of national emergency. As governments and other organisations introduce new procedures, some are producing forms which result in the need to enter data into various systems. Those forms are being received as paper handwritten. Data entry field by field can be time consuming and error prone. Using an automated form reading process, a pile of scanned forms can be quickly read, and then all someone needs to do manually is visually check them and make amendments. Time is reduced, accuracy increased, and the resulting electronic data is ready for automatic input into the system of record. Setup of this process is rapid. The user in UiPath's development studio defines the fields to be extracted and then teaches the system where to find them on the page. This can then be incorporated into an end-to-end workflow, and then this is ready to run. With a batch of forms now scanned, let's have a look at how this works in practice. This is the workflow in UiPath Studio being run. Document is now being processed in the background. and now the results are presented to the user in the validation station window. The user is able to see the results on the left with a percentage confidence that the extraction is correct, and they are then able to click on each field and see where that data was sourced from on the right-hand side. If something needs correcting, they can simply overtype in the window on the left-hand side. Most of the fields have been extracted correctly. This one needs retyping completely, but the overall process is much, much faster than typing the entire form from scratch. The results, in this case, are output to an Excel sheet, and this is ready for ingestion into another system. The outcomes of applying this technology: fewer people entering data, fewer keying errors, automatic updating of downstream systems, and automated archiving of the paperwork. That's it. Thank you for watching.
And so just to highlight that the fact that there was a review of that particular processing of information from the bot. And so generally you'll have a lot of the the forms being processed by the bot that has a high level confidence score, meaning that that the bot is very confident that it accurately captured the information. So those would go without a human review. But some of them, like for example handwriting that may be difficult to read, there would be a lower confidence score, and so those would be provided to folks to review, government workers, to make sure that the information was entered properly. So that can cut down workloads by massive amounts, 80 to 90%. And so that is a example of how it's working. And this one is a FOIA redaction example. So all government organizations generally have a requirement to provide information, and in some cases it has to be redacted. So with FOIA, there's a time requirement, and there are penalties if you're not able to complete redactions and provide that information in a timely fashion. So this is a demonstration on how a bot actually automatically redacts, and it also learns in terms of future redactions what sensitive information is, and also keeps individuals in the loop as it learns. So this really helps optimize that particular process, especially if you're dealing with hundreds of requests, and instead of hiring more and more individuals to be able to process them, is to be able to reduce that workload, have them focus on other high value types of activities, and let the bot redact the majority of the information in a file. So if you think of Grammarly, a technology that helps with spelling and grammar, this is similar to that in terms of for redaction. It's able to auto redact most of it, and then you're able to deal with the rest.
Hello, today I will demonstrate a custom activity I built in UiPath. Its purpose is to hide confidential text before publishing PDFs, a common step to ensure compliance to data privacy laws. Redaction is often laborious and error-prone, and mistakes can lead to costly legal ramifications. Here, I have a group of files. Some are contracts, service agreements, and financial documents with sensitive data. For example, I'll open the general contractor document. Here, we see lots of sensitive data, such as tax IDs, dates, account numbers, government-issued IDs, and even the name of what could be a minor. Many people would redact this manually, a process that's very time-consuming and prone to error. But what if we could simply tell our robot what kinds of things to redact? Here, I will select a file, and for demonstration purposes, I will ask the robot to highlight the sensitive data rather than redact it. Next, I'll write in the name of the minor and ask the robot to look for any text that contains social security numbers and other confidential data. In the top left, you can see a status report of what the robot is doing right now. Once the robot completes the redaction, it exports the redacted document to a user-designated folder. Again, for the purpose of this demo, I selected the option to highlight rather than to redact the document. As you can see, it was able to find all of the sensitive data. Often, you might have several documents needing redaction. Instead of choosing a single file manually, you may want the robot to continually monitor a specific folder and automatically redact any and all PDF documents that end up there. So let's see how well the robot redacts multiple PDFs in batch mode. Let's take a peek at what the robot is doing by entering the redaction folder and looking at the output as the robot is completing each document. Finally, our robot finished redacting all of the PDFs. As we open each document, you'll see that the robot automatically redacted the sensitive data. Note that the redaction color is set to orange to help you view it for this demo. In summary, the UiPath robot helps to ensure legal compliance, reduce the time to safely publish, and doesn't rely on.
And so that was a good example of how redaction could actually be automated. And so there's a lot of different kinds of use cases that really are great candidates for RPA. And as Johnny mentioned, I'm sure there are many that you can think of right now. There actually has been automation in courts in New Jersey and a couple other state courts. Automation has helped reduce backlogs of court cases, help automate different types of connections between disparate systems, including ODR and case management systems. And so really, we're really excited about the technology. It is very lightweight. The current timeframes of deployment are generally 2 to 3 months as opposed to years. And you can really get started in a low value, low dollar amount as far as a pilot. So the easiest way, and generally agencies start with a pilot. So generally you can start in a very small dollar amount, and you can localize it on a computer and get done in 2 to 3 months, and really show the return on investment, the value that it can produce for your particular court, your particular organization. And so Johnny and my organization can certainly help in terms of being able to work through with you the particulars of your interest and how this can help you. So please reach out to us on this page that is listed here. And we're also providing grants for various organizations to get started. So if in our discussions it looks like a good candidate for a particular grant, we would love to work with a handful of organizations on those projects and be able to get started, and be able to make that happen. And so really appreciated the opportunity to speak with all of you and be able to share the knowledge of how this is really transforming government, and would love to further the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Anthony. And I think before we get to the Q&A section, we had a couple of announcements from the NACOM team.
Yes, Johnny, Anthony, thank you very much. Great information, and we have a few questions we'll get to. But before that, it's a great tie-in for our next NACOM Court Leaders Advantage video podcast, and it's on the local complex issues. How are they solving them? This is a great opportunity to look at ways to solve issues. This one will be on January 21st, just 2 weeks from now. So save that date and look for the NACOM Court Leaders Advantage video podcast. Speaking of saving the date, we are on track to be in San Diego on July 11th through the 15th for our annual conference. So the 2021 NACOM Annual Conference is scheduled to be in person, live, July 11th through the 15th in San Diego. So save that date and have some more information coming soon at the NACOM net.org email. If you are not a NACOM member, now is a great time to join us. Speaking of conferences, it does give you a discounted registration for conferences. We also offer scholarships to our NACOM members. Becoming a member gives you a great opportunity to be one-on-one mentor with experienced court professionals. We have great publications from our court manager and Court Express talking about what's live and relevant in the industry today. So, and then you can also give a little time and serve on the NACOM boards and committees, such as this communication committee hosting today's webinar, and others with your colleagues in the field and throughout the NACOM board. So consider joining NACOM and be a member and share with your colleagues. So join today. With that, we will ask a few questions while I have the microphone. I'll start off with the first one that came through, and that was, courts have been using formal process reengineering to streamline and automate manual and paper-based processes. How is RPA different than PR?
So
Anthony, you want to take that one, sir?
Sure. I could definitely do it from a technology perspective. I'd love Johnny for you to give context, particularly in the courts. But for RPA, robotic process automation, really the newer aspects of it is that it is agile and it can adopt. So it can certainly do repetitive tasks, and it's above like what the people generally define as automation as a macro, for example, in Excel. But this really goes across applications. It connects with artificial intelligence, so it's able to deal with variances as far as situations and being able to adjust for that. So the revolution really is being able to have enhanced capabilities like document reading, understanding, being able to do different things in terms of automation in the areas of processing across different types of applications, and then data interaction as well. So those are the things that I think that are way different at this point. But I think some of the things that are still fundamental is that you don't want to automate processes as is. You definitely want to take the opportunity for automation of those processes to revisit them, make sure that you take a look at why you're doing certain things and be able to streamline it as much as possible, so that when you automate a particular process, that it's as optimal as possible. Johnny, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you covered it really well. So I think the difference between the two is that whole process reengineering function is really something that you should do before you implement RPA. So it would be a part of the implementation process, like you just mentioned. In traditional PR, there may be some system changes that are involved. Maybe your business process reengineering as a component of the overall implementation process for RPA versus RPA, which is the solution which automates the actual processes themselves.
Great. Speaking of automation and document reading, our next question is, our court systems is in the process of implementing e-filing. How can RPA be added to our process at this point?
Yeah, and so e-filing is a great ingestion point as far as being able to have electronic files being entered. So if that's a newer component within the system, RPA can help be that bridge to the gap as far as going from the e-file, what is actually the output, and putting it into those other systems that are required, whether it's in the courts or you're connecting to a partner, say from a state court to a local court, or corrections at the state level to a local county jail. So those are the things I think the promise of opportunities is to be able to take that innovation, the e-file, and being able to connect all those disparate systems where the systems aren't able to talk to each other, or what they say is that you have a human chain. So basically you have an individual take that e-file, review it, and then key that information into those other systems. So this is where RPA is a perfect fit to be able to bridge that gap. Johnny?
I think you nailed it, sir. E-filing is one of those things that it really depends on how it's being implemented. And in a lot of jurisdictions, like you said, they're totally just separate systems from your court case management system. I think of a couple of states, like Michigan and a few other places where you might have like major e-filing platforms, but then you've got these disparate case management systems. So RPA is certainly an opportunity to reduce that redundant data entry. So first, the data entry that's being done by the filer, right, to get that information into the e-filing system in the first place, but then moving that over to the courts. In some environments, we understand that there's a high level of integration, so you may not need something like RPA. but there's a lot of other environments where the e-filing platform is completely separate from the case management platform. And even in those cases where there's some integration, there's still an opportunity to actually automate the processes right around the integrated systems. But you know, I think e-filing, like Tony mentioned, is a great ingestion point, great opportunity to look at applying something like RPA. I would start by looking at the business processes that you're thinking you're going to have to utilize. So you want to do some kind of business process analysis. You also want to do like a technical analysis. You know, what are the opportunities to integrate or not between the two different systems? Any kind of technical barriers that you might have in terms of connectivity, security, things like that. And then take a look at how we could use RPA to actually implement those automated processes on the back end. But I think a pilot would be a good place to start. But certainly that's something that we could you know, help you out with in terms of taking a look at that.
Great. The next two questions you kind of touched on, but I didn't know if you wanted to expand on it. First one was, you mentioned RPA assisting in computer conversions. Can you expand on the savings and ROI for court to justify for operations and budgetary?
Yeah, Johnny, would you mind starting off on that one?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that when you look at implementing a new court system, it really depends on the number of business processes. So one of the first things I always like to recommend is that clients start with a really good business process inventory. Oftentimes that's not the case. We get into the implementation and then we start scrambling to figure out all of our business processes. But one of the things that you want to do is be able, because it's going to vary from court to court, from implementation to implementation. So you really need to start with some level of analysis. You know, let's look at the pieces in terms of technology that you're going to put together. Look at the pieces in terms of business processes and different stakeholder groups that you're trying to connect. And then I think your ROI is going to be different for each implementation. But certainly, you know, starting with some kind of, again, you know, pilot or, you know, just taking a look at what you're doing will be able to give you that feedback. Because we can look at areas, when you look at implementation, right, the business process inventory, development, that piece of it is going to be pretty much what it's going to be, because you have to have the conversations with the different subject matter experts to really get that good, solid business process inventory, identify all your connection points between the different agencies and offices. So you got to do that. That's going to require the human piece regardless. But then you start to get into your data conversion. That's oftentimes another big piece of this. And when you look at converting data, you've got to convert. Typically, there's going to be some images. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. But usually most courts, at least today, have images somewhere. There's also going to be case data. Sometimes they're in the same system, sometimes they're not. That's another one of those opportunities for RPA to potentially help with that conversion process. So it might be able to help with the conversion process. There's also typically an ongoing or recurring testing component that's going to be a part of the implementation. So that's another place that you can plug RPA in, because one of the things that organizations are using RPA for is to actually vet and test systems in general. So that's another piece when you look at the overall implementation, that you can potentially automate a significant portion of that. And then again, you get some savings there in terms of both time and actual resources that you have to apply for that. So I would recommend taking a look at your implementation, breaking it down to those components. You know, you've got your business process analysis that should be happening up front. You've got some type of data conversion that's going to happen. You've got testing that needs to happen. And those are at least 3 areas right off the bat in which RPA can help. And another area that maybe is not as traditional as one of those 3 areas I just mentioned is when you're looking at your business process development, just having the bot be able to go through a process that you've tightly defined and refined over time. And you can actually use that as a training opportunity as well. So all those different areas, RPA can potentially impact the major implementation, in addition to the operational impacts that we talked about in terms of actually being able to perform redaction for you, actually being able to move documents over, live documents in terms of helping to integrate your e-filing with your case management systems and such. But it really depends on each implementation. And so we want to take a look at the pieces you plan to put together. What are your desired outcomes? Take a look at those business processes and identify opportunities. And then you can get your ROI that way.
Yeah, and Johnny, those are great. I would just add really quick, as far as additional ROI, is that when you have surges like COVID-19 and you have your backlog of court cases and things, I mean, certainly it can help as far as automating those repeatable tasks, but also if you have a requirement to have temporary surges of, you know, you hire contractors because you need those folks to be able to bring down the backlog is that you can incorporate automation so you can save money and costs around those particular areas as far as reducing the surge. So that's one particular area, and also extending the life of your systems. So the challenge is that when you bring in certain newer technologies is that the lack of interoperability, as was mentioned with ODR and your case management system, is that you can bridge that gap with RPA. So you can extend the life of your legacy systems and connect them with newer technologies. So that's the cost savings in itself, so that you don't have to modernize all of the pieces in your system. You now have a technology that can bridge that gap, so that can save millions of dollars in being able to do that type of connection, and you can extend the life of your legacy system. So operationally, it could save a lot of money and time. Really, I want to emphasize that this is a technology that helps the government worker in being able to deal with the caseloads and the challenges around the backlogs. And so not only is there an ROI, but it also improves the lives and the folks who are working and delivering the services and making their jobs a little bit easier.
Well, perfect timing, gentlemen. That takes us right to the end of the hour. I appreciate both of your knowledge and expertise today. I look forward to sharing it with our members, and thanks again for offering a great service. And anybody will get the slides here for contact information as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Take care.